Yeah, there's a strike looming for workers on the East and West Coast that could have a huge impact on the economy. Workers with the International Longshoremen's Union are threatening to strike on October 1st. Longshoremen are the workers who load and unload cargo. The union is demanding significant pay raises and a total ban on the automation of equipment that longshoremen typically operate in 36 posts. Experts say if the union does strike and it lasts more than a month, we could see nationwide product shortages.
Pure evil the maritime logistics industry files. Deep dive. Dockworkers, longshoremen, etc. Hey guys, it's me here, Comrade Lavender here, and I'm back with another YouTube video here. Today I wanted to talk about pure evil the maritime logistics industry files. Deep dive. Dockworkers, longshoremen, true crime, etc. But before we get started, all my YouTube videos related to this topic will be on the screen right now if you would like to check them out. So let's get into this YouTube video topic.
Thousands of shipping containers arrive at Southern California ports each day, needing plenty of workers to help unload. But as William Lajeunesse explains, President Trump's tariffs are impacting ship traffic from Asia, and hundreds of seafarers could soon be out of a job.
The outlook at this exact moment is very grim.
The impact of President Trump's tariffs being felt at U.S. ports. In Southern California, the ports of L.A. and Long Beach heavily rely on imports from China, which have been hit with tariffs of up to 145%.
Truly going to be a catastrophic year. More than half of the folks that I know are talking about closing their doors.
Officials say a record 80 cargo ships from Asia to the West Coast have been canceled, and nearly half of all scheduled shipments for the next month have been scrapped.
There'll be only so many jobs to go around and a lot of guys looking for work. It's going to affect us all, so, it's our livelihood.
Local officials are worried about a ripple effect on the economy.
Of course, when you lose jobs, unemployment goes up, there's less consumer spending, and 2/3 of our GDP is based on consumer spending. So if you look at that formula, we have concerns about the future.
Business owners are pleading with the government.
Give us enough time to figure it out. Give us enough time to identify new partners, find new ways to make it work.
And yet, neither the U.S. nor China are letting up in the trade war.
As far as I know, China and the U.S. have not conducted consultations or negotiations on tariff issues, let alone reached an agreement. We will fight if we must, and our doors are open if the U.S. wants to talk.
The bottom line is the U.S. imports more than $400 billion in products from China. Most come through here. Those we spoke to want fair trade. They only hope this de-escalates before they lose their job. In San Pedro, California, William Lajeunesse, Fox News.
The logistics industry is key to the global circulation of goods under capitalism. Workers have immense power within it to grind that circulation to a halt if they can get organized. Around 90% of our goods are transported worldwide by sea. The water-based trade routes span the entire globe. Particularly dense is commercial shipping traffic in the North Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and the North Pacific. Tens of thousands of cargo ships are on the move every year. Add to that hundreds of cruise ships and fishing fleets. The world's intensive shipping activity has many negative impacts on the marine environment. Oil pollution is the best known one, which is caused by shipping.
Maritime shipping generates some 3% of the world's CO2 emissions. Now that may not seem like a lot, but if shipping were a country, well, it would be the 6th largest emitter in the world. Now the problem is that most cargo ships run on bunker fuel. It's cheap and it's dirty. It emits fine particles into the air, as well as nitrous oxide and sulfur. In fact, it contains 3,000 times the amount of sulfur that diesel does that's used for cars.
Ship pollution is a massive issue that often flies under the radar. Did you know that shipping contributes to about 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions? That's equivalent to the emissions of a country like Germany. It's staggering to think that the very vessels that connect our world are also major polluters. Then there's the issue of oil spills. While they're not as common as they used to be, when they happen, the impact can be catastrophic. Just one spill can devastate marine life and coastal ecosystems for decades. Speaking of marine life, ships also release ballast water, which can introduce invasive species into new environments, disrupting local ecosystems and threatening native species. Let's not forget about the noise pollution generated by ships. This underwater cacophony can interfere with the communication of marine animals like whales and dolphins, affecting their ability to navigate and find food. And the waste? Ships produce an astonishing amount of garbage. It's estimated that around 1 million tons of plastic waste end up in the oceans each year, much of it coming from shipping activities. Air pollution from ships is another concern. They emit sulfur oxides and nitrogen oxides, which contribute to acid rain and respiratory problems in humans. The International Maritime Organization has set regulations to reduce these emissions, but enforcement can be tricky. Finally, there's the issue of shipbreaking. When ships reach the end of their life, they're often dismantled in developing countries under hazardous conditions.
Tanker accidents are typically associated with severe environmental damage in marine ecosystems. However, most oil pollution in the seas comes from land effluents and from the washing out of bilges and ballast water drainage at sea by merchant ships. Despite the MARPOL agreement, several 100,000 tons of oil are released into the oceans each year through ship operations only, as a result of accidents and illegal disposal. In addition to crude oil, chemical pollutants also enter the sea by way of cargo ship accidents or by emptying the tanks with chemically treated feces, atmospheric pollution by carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, sulfur and nitrogen oxides and particulate matter, which is caused by commercial shipping, is not insignificant. It contributes to warming, and in particular due to carbon dioxide emissions, to acidification of the oceans. The latter complicates the skeletal formation of many marine organisms, such as lime-based corals, since calcium carbonate lime becomes scarcer due to its chemical buffering action against the reduction of seawater pH levels, which results from dissolved carbon dioxide. A threat to marine animals which not obvious to us humans is underwater noise. Ships produce low-frequency sounds from 10 Hz to 1 kHz, which are audible over enormous distances and represent the most common noise in the sea. Ship noise generates an ever-present acoustic, fog, underwater that drowns out natural noise and sounds, disturbing the migratory routes of marine mammals, causing collisions between whales and ships, and limiting their ability to communicate and orient themselves. During World War II, asbestos was widely employed in shipbuilding owing to its high resistance to heat and excellent insulation properties, the same characteristics that led to its extensive usage in consumer goods. As a result, shipyard workers were often exposed to asbestos-containing boilers, steam pipes, wall insulation, turbines, pipe coverings, gaskets, pumps, and cement. Whenever a longshoreman is carrying asbestos-containing cargo, the mere act of moving the items may cause the asbestos to be disturbed, causing the fibers to become airborne and inhaled, potentially leading to the development of life-threatening diseases if the asbestos fibers become embedded in the longshoreman's lungs.
A steady job with a good salary and a lucrative bonus. That's the promise that tempts many Indonesian men to leave their homes and head to sea. But what they get is this. Footage released by the Indonesian Seafarers movement shows crew members sleeping on the floor in the cargo hold, looking malnourished and exhausted. One of them is Ramatullah. He says he was tricked by an Indonesian recruiting agency, trafficked to Somalia, and forced to spend 9 brutal months aboard a Chinese fishing boat, manning nets and packing fish for 18 hours a day.
When we didn't catch enough fish or squid, we were beaten by the captain. We were beaten a lot. I'm still traumatized by it.
On board, the crew claim they were given a choice between going hungry and eating spoiled fish. And they didn't even have clean water.
On the rare occasion we were given fish, we could tell by the smell that the fish was already bad. After smelling it, we couldn't eat it. On a daily basis, all we got was cabbage and rice with a little salt. And we drank condensation water that we collected from the air conditioner.
Ramatullah and his crewmates are now back home, and they've taken photos and videos to document their experience.
Each year, thousands of young seafarers are unwittingly trafficked into slave-like and dangerous conditions aboard dark ships that transport illicit cargo around the globe. Seafarers are the backbone of the global maritime industry, but they're often illegally recruited, scammed into dangerous work, and then abandoned at sea. Maritime shipping industry has 1.8 million seafarers. Unlicensed recruitment agents trawl villages in low-income areas of India and other Asian nations, promising young men the chance to earn a lucrative income at sea. They extract thousands of dollars of illegal recruitment fees from families hoping to build a better life. When Coast Guard officers boarded junior seafarer Omkar Power's ship off of Trinidad and Tobago in 2020, one of them pointed a gun at his face. They searched the ship. After 2 days, they found 450 kilograms of cocaine in the tank, said Power. Power and the rest of the crew were jailed and interrogated in a Trinidadian detention center for 15 days. The ship's captain and second officer were later prosecuted. Power, who was 20 at the time, had no knowledge of the smuggling operation and was never charged. Still, he was detained at an immigration center for 4 months before being deported back to India. His parents, who are farmers, scrambled to raise money to bring him home. Power was already in debt, having borrowed $2,400 to pay recruitment fees for what he thought was the start of a promising seafaring career. "I felt so bad," he said. "Before this happened, I never imagined I'd be jailed." Power is one of thousands of young seafarers lured into dangerous or illegal maritime work, often through recruitment scams or misrepresented job offers. Many end up unpaid, detained or trapped aboard abandoned vessels for months, even years. Context interviewed maritime industry experts and 38 seafarers working on merchant vessels for this story. Their accounts reveal a growing problem of abuse, neglect, and impunity. An estimated 1.8 million seafarers are the backbone of the world's maritime shipping industry, which accounts for 80% of global trade, including 90% of energy. Many are routinely exploited, working under dangerous conditions with little recourse. And they are increasingly at risk of abandonment, left on board vessels after a shipowner fails to cover repatriation costs, provide essential support, or pay wages. In 2024, incidents of abandonment surged to a record high. 3,133 crew were deserted by shipowners, up 87% from the previous year, according to the International Transport Workers Federation (ITF). Many more cases likely go unreported, particularly when seafarers are stranded without internet, the means or autonomy to contact the authorities. According to ITF representatives, the problem is only getting worse. Data released by the ITF in May showed that vessel abandonments have surged nearly 33% to 158 cases this year, up from 119 at the same point in 2024. More than 1,500 seafarers have requested assistance from the ITF. "Unpaid wages are one of the biggest issues we see," said Josh Messick, executive director of the Baltimore International Seafarers Center, an organization that provides support to seafarers whose vessels dock at the Port of Baltimore in the United States. It also investigates ships for signs that the MLC is not being upheld. Their hours are logged incorrectly. They work overtime and don't get paid for it. In a few months, they can lose thousands of dollars, he said. Such abuses often go unrecorded, because seafarers fear that filing complaints with the authorities may trigger their dismissal and leave them blacklisted from other work, said Kairag Bari, operations manager at the International Seafarers Welfare and Assistance Network. Many of the seafarers interviewed for this story said they were required to pay illegal recruitment fees, often thousands of dollars, to secure jobs. These fees, banned under the International Labor Organization, can trap workers in debt bondage. making them more vulnerable to abuse and less likely to report violations. The rise of unregulated ship management companies, which are contractors that run vessels on behalf of owners, has also fueled abuse. According to industry insiders, the UAE is a hub for global shipping companies, but has not ratified the MLC. The country is also accused of maintaining poor labor protections for migrant workers. Vinay Kumar, a second engineer from India who worked on merchant vessels, joined the crew of a tanker run by a UAE shipowner in 2019. When the company ran into financial trouble, it stopped paying salaries, Kumar said, and he and 4 others were trapped on board for 21 months 3 miles off the Dubai coast. We didn't have enough fuel to cook or run air conditioning. We took showers using seawater, he said. We were like slaves. With no electricity for a month, the crew depended on charities to survive. In January 2021, the vessel ran aground during a storm. Only after the ship was sold were the men allowed to go home, with just 70% of their owed wages. I don't want to go back to sea again, Kumar said. I've seen hell.
During the 1934 West Coast waterfront strike, the longshoremen in every U.S. West Coast port walked out on May 9th in demand for better working conditions and higher pay. The work stoppage succeeded in delaying or stopping the movement of all goods by rail out of the ports. After almost 2 months of striking, the situation was extremely tense and volatile.
Images just coming in tonight, the disaster at a U.S. port. Dozens of shipping containers falling off a cargo ship and right into the water. Where those containers were from and how this happened. Trevor Ault is on the scene in Los Angeles.
Oh, it's going on the stacks! This is the moment dozens of cargo containers went tumbling off a ship at California's Port of Long Beach.
It looks like dominoes. It looks like once one portion started to fall, then more fell.
The Mississippi had just arrived from China early this morning, loaded with hundreds of containers.
Look at how they're teetering right on the edge there. This is the backside of the ship.
Officials say no one was injured, but cargo operations were suspended while workers rushed to secure the containers.
You see the fireboat, Long Beach fireboat there, I think that's their fireboat, using the water pressure to try and push some of those containers back to the corner where they want to keep them before they may sink.
Shoes and clothing seen scattered in the water, some containers falling directly onto a smaller boat alongside the ship.
If someone would have been on that boat when those containers fell, they would have been killed.
The union, representing around 45,000 dock workers, are demanding things like higher wages. They have not held negotiations with ports representatives since June. Fox 5's Stephanie Bertini is live in Lower Manhattan, where Governor Kathy Hochul just spoke about this potential strike. Stephanie, what she had to say?
So the main thing the governor wants New Yorkers to know is that she says this is all under control. Don't worry, don't panic. She says this should be fine and really shouldn't affect us, affect consumers, unless, of course, officials say this lasts longer than a couple weeks.
A container ship with crew members who have confirmed cases of COVID-19 arrived at Delta Port earlier this week. 2 people have tested positive, while 5 others are in isolation waiting for results. Usually there are between 20 and 25 crew members on container ships. A spokesperson from the International Longshore and Warehouse Union says it is the first ship they know of to come in with positive cases.
Who are longshoremen? The origins of the terms longshore and longshoremen come from a waterfront manager's call for casual workers along the shore to work on the docks. More specifically, longshoremen are workers whose main job is to load and unload cargo between ships at a dock and the warehouses of a coastal port. In 1934, longshore work was broken into many different stages of production, and workers were variously employed as longshoremen, gang bosses, hatch tenders, winch drivers, donkey drivers, boom men, Burton men, sack turners, side runners, front men, and jitney drivers. In the early 20th century, longshoremen held very strategic jobs for the global economic system, since much more of the world's commerce used to be transported by ships as opposed to planes. And because greater labor power was needed to load and unload cargo, compared to the increased use of mechanization in U.S. ports today. How a 1934 waterfront strike was a major turning point for West Coast labor. 83 days during the summer of 1934 will be honored forever by men and women of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, the ILWU. It was a time when longshoremen fought, fell, and ultimately triumphed together despite the odds against them. At 8 a.m. on May 9, 1934, more than 12,000 union members of the International Longshoremen's Association walked off the job from Bellingham to San Diego, crippling West Coast shipping. It was the middle of the Great Depression. Competition was fierce, not only for jobs, but among the shipping companies vying for profits. Workers competed against each other to keep their jobs and were forced to accept wage cuts and working conditions or be blacklisted. Fed up with miserable conditions, rank-and-file longshoremen began to secretly organize along the West Coast. Led by radical labor activists, new ILA local chapters emerged and old ones regrouped under the unified banner of the Pacific Coast District. Negotiations collapsed, and longshoremen, coastwide, voted to strike in solidarity. The strike, which would last nearly 3 months, hit Oregon hard. The work stoppage paralyzed commerce. Lumber and grain exports ceased, and nearly 50,000 workers lost jobs, including as many as 15,000 people working in the Portland area. Shipowners and waterfront employers faced mounting financial losses as ships idled in ports and cargo sat unmoved from northern Washington to southern California. Although it was the Depression, shopkeepers, farmers, and unemployed workers provided critical support to the strikers by joining picket lines and donating food and supplies. Other maritime union members joined the strike in a strong show of solidarity. Leading businessmen and waterfront employers were determined to open the ports, by force if necessary. Violent clashes erupted between picketers and police up and down the coast. In San Francisco, 2 strikers were shot dead, and hundreds were injured in a July 5 battle that became known as Bloody Thursday. Portland would endure its own Bloody Wednesday, when Mayor Joseph Carson and Police Chief Burton Lawson attempted to open a strategic shipping terminal in the north end of town. 4 longshoremen were badly injured during the battle that ensued in an adjacent park. On July 31, 1934, longshoremen tentatively returned to work after both sides in the strike agreed to arbitration by a national board appointed by President Franklin Roosevelt. 2 months later, the board would award the strikers a victory, a coastwide contract, union-controlled hearing halls, and increased wages. The 1934 waterfront strike was considered a major turning point for West Coast labor. The success of the longshoremen would stand as an example for further union organizing by other workers in many different industries. Historically, black longshoremen have been instrumental in the industry since slavery. In Charleston, North Carolina, black longshoremen who attempted to strike were met with calls of being lazy ex-slaves who poor whites could replace. Banding together, they would create the Longshoremen's Protective Union Association of Charleston a year later. More recently, in 2018, 19 members of the ILA were arrested in Charleston after a rally and 2-block march over demands for a living, union rights for all workers, and additional education funding. The protests were also aimed at fighting other issues, including militarism, poverty, and racism. Anyone who has followed the ILA over the decades will know that this isn't new to the largest union of maritime workers in North America, who shut down ports in honor of Martin Luther King following his assassination in 1968. In New Orleans during the late 1800s, black longshoremen union workers attempted to work alongside white union workers. The power dynamic led to racial tensions that escalated into the 1895 New Orleans dockworkers riot. A racially motivated attack on non-union black dockworkers by white dockworkers over 4 days left 6 black laborers dead at the hands of several hundred white men. Then Louisiana Governor Murphy J. Foster even called on the state militia to protect black dockworkers. Black people have been at the forefront of various labor movements in America throughout history. Dockworkers aren't any different. They've fought against various injustices at the cost of their economic well-being and sometimes their lives. Though historically marginalized, black dockworkers have continued to pave the way for rights that not only helped them.
It's a really hard job to understand unless you are fully submerged in it And so much of it is just on-the-job training. They throw you in, you figure it out. You hope that you're working with someone that's willing to like mentor you and show you the ropes.
I think I did lashing so much that it kind of became my comfort spot. I remember I had a lashing job. I had a double. I took a double, and it was a day side, so from 8 to 5. Then I had that same night from 6 to 3 in the morning. Worst job that I've had down here, because it was straight lash, like no breaks. You lashed the whole day side, went to the night side, and then lashed. And I went home with bruises on my thighs, and I was so sore.
Article that came out in March 24, 1990 talks about other complaints like the heavy-duty abuse part of dock life for women labor longshoremen are slow to accept them as equals in the hard task of shiploading. But the pay is a strong attraction, with a bachelor's degree in German and French and a master. In education, Shanna's Artie Holly Cordich never figured she would wear steel-toed boots and a hard hat to work. But in 1985, 3 years after a federal lawsuit cleared the way for women to load and unload cargo at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, the one-time school librarian and creative writing teacher decided she could make a better living working the docks. Today, she is part of a local industry that, at least on the surface, has made great strides toward breaking down sex barriers in a profession that, for centuries, has been dominated by men. Of the 2,837 registered longshore workers in Los Angeles Harbor, 245 are women, and industry sources say that figure is greater than at any other major port in the country. But as Artie Holly Cordich and other longshore workers, both men and women, attest, the numbers do not tell the whole story. While some women say life on the waterfront is just fine, others have reported a wide range of harassment from dirty jokes to death threats. For so long, Artie Holly Cordich explains, the docks have been a boys' club. Women just weren't allowed, and then all of a sudden they let women in, and there was a lot of, and there still is, men going home to their wives and telling them, I had to work with this dumb broad today and she didn't know how to do anything. At a federal court hearing in February, the Union Local 13 of the International Longshoremen's and Warehousemen's Union and the Pacific Maritime ASIN, the organization that represents the terminal operators who employ longshoremen, agreed to grant permanent status to the latest group of women hired. But at least 6 women dock workers who spoke out at that hearing say they have since received repeated death threats and have been physically harassed by their male co-workers. One suspects fellow longshoremen of killing her cat with rat poison and pouring sugar in the gas tank of her car. Another said she was recently spit on while dozens of men applauded. The same man, she said, 2 times has threatened me that if I was ever on his ship and he was on the crane, he would make sure that I was crushed. Sometimes, men's feelings toward women crop up in a benign, subtle way, explained Astrid Thangren, a dock worker for the last 5 years. A man will say, oh, here, let me get that for you. And right then he puts you in a less powerful position. All of a sudden, there it is, the male-female role. Even today, with the introduction of women into the workforce not only in Los Angeles, but in small numbers in other parts of the country as well, the name remains unchanged. In industry circles, there is no such thing as a longshorewoman. They are called women longshoremen. It is without a doubt a dangerous job. According to a study published last year by the U.S. Department of Labor Statistics, there were 17 injuries and illnesses per 100 full-time longshore workers in 1987, more than double the national rate for all private industries that year. Moreover, the study found the number of lost workdays due to injury, 422 days per 100 full-time workers, was the highest of any industry, and 6 times greater than the national rate for industrial injuries. Yet the work has gotten easier over the last 2 decades, with mechanization bringing about dramatic changes in the way dockworkers do their jobs. At least at Los Angeles Harbor, much of longshoring now involves driving either forklifts, trucks, or the foreign cars that arrive at the ports by the thousands. Still, some tasks are grimy and intimidating. Longshoremen must be willing to climb up greasy ladders and wrestle with the often rusty chains that secure the vessel's cargo, which can be anything from boxes of grapes to huge farm tractors. They must be willing to ride in an open crane basket 5 or 6 stories high to the top of a container-laden ship, and then lean over the edge of the massive containers to remove the steel locks that keep them in place. For all the danger and the aching muscles, the pay in longshoring is good. And that's what attracts most people to it. Thangren, for instance, was earning $7 an hour as a pattern maker for a children's clothing company when, in 1984, she decided to quit and become a casual, longshore worker, a non-union member who picks up jobs on an infrequent basis. 2 months ago, she was registered as a union member. Her hourly wage is now $15.
Terminals are busy, fast-paced, always in motion. You must be alert and aware of your surroundings at all times. Scan the environment for hazards. Take steps to protect yourself and others. Container cranes are large, powerful, and fast. Use extreme care when you work with and around them. The incident you are about to see actually happened and resulted in the death of a longshore worker. Three lashers from the lashing gang were disembarking the ship for a break. They walked down the gangway and onto the pier, between the bull rail and crane legs, while container loading operations continued in the hatch just aft of the ship's deckhouse. The crane operator had just landed a container onto the ship's hatch cover. The container automatically locked into the deck fittings, which secured the container to the hatch cover. The operator then hoisted the spreader beam, unaware that he had not disengaged the spreader from the container, which was now locked to the hatch cover. As the container was lifted, it also lifted the hatch cover, which had several other containers on the hatch. As the hatch cover was raised, the inshore container straddling the hatch cover and the pedestal platform was twisted outboard, broke its deck securing twist locks, and rolled off the ship. 2 of the lashers managed to jump out of the way. However, the container struck the 3rd lasher, killing her instantly.
Muchachos. Find space without any air monitoring. As the 2 night shift employees set up the equipment, a spark ignited the flammable paint vapors and caused a flash fire. Both employees were killed. Sufficient ventilation would have kept the concentration of flammable vapors below 10% of the lower explosive limit. A shipyard competent person should have visually inspected and tested the confined space for oxygen content and lower explosive limits prior to entry by employees and found the flammable atmosphere. There should be no plugs or electrical connections within 50 feet of hazardous atmospheres and painting operations.
If you ordered a teddy bear or a designer picture frame as a holiday gift, you know that it likely took a lot longer to get here than in past years. There have been problems getting things from point A to point B since the pandemic started. At one point in October, 77% of the world's ports were experiencing long delays. More than most Americans, Longshore Union ILWU members grasp what supply chain problems are and how they come about. ILWU members handle the containers that go into and out of the United States through 9 West Coast ports. For example, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach moved the equivalent of 10 million 20-foot containers in the first half of 2021, a record high. The 2 side-by-side ports handle about 31% of all seaborne consumer goods and commodities entering the U.S., largely from Asia. Together, they are the 9th biggest port in the world, in part because they are among the few able to welcome newer, much larger ships. But despite the increased volume processed this year, it hasn't been enough to handle the consumer demand for more products. At one point in November, upwards of 80 ships were waiting to unload outside the 2 ports, as the just-in-time system crumbled under the weight of its own contradictions. By 2021, because of the enormous demand and the limited supply of ships, the price to ship goods across the ocean had skyrocketed. Another contributing factor. Over the past decade, the 8 largest carrier companies had organized themselves into a cartel, which by 2018 controlled 80% of container shipping. The cost of sending freight from Asia to the U.S. increased tenfold this past summer, and the freight carriers made out like bandits. Maersk, the largest shipping company, had its most profitable quarter in its century-long history. In the third quarter of 2021, alone its operating profits reached $5.9 billion. Also in short supply were truck drivers, truck chassis, warehouse space, and other links in the supply chain. One central issue is the employers' drive to replace workers with bots. LA Long Beach is a major battleground for automation, said Local 23 member Brian Skiffington. At 4 automated terminals there, instead of 5 or more trucks per gang, there are cabless robot trucks and a single supervisor, a massive elimination of labor. Port truck drivers provide fodder for anti-union propaganda, such as the right-wing Washington Examiner's stream of recent pieces with titles like "Lazy Crane Operators Making $250,000 a Year Exacerbating Port Crisis, Truckers Say," which cites the boss's skewed salary stats and 6 unnamed truckers. The challenges that truckers and warehouse workers face are real. For example, drivers get paid by the load, so waiting hours or days for their truck to get loaded or unloaded can cost them a pretty penny. In the space of barely 6 weeks this summer, the maritime and port industries saw a grim series of fatal incidents worldwide. These tragedies are the predictable outcome of a system that subordinates human life to corporate profit, aided by government deregulation, and the complicity of trade union bureaucracies. On June 2, a crew member was killed aboard the Tidewater Polaris, a platform supply vessel servicing Equinor's Empire Wind 1 offshore project near New York. Neither Tidewater nor Equinor released the victim's name, age, nationality, or the circumstances of the death. Just 4 days later, on June 6, a dockworker drowned in Macau after falling into the harbor. The incident was reported with minimal detail, made murkier still when a ship captain drowned in the same area about a week later. Crushing deaths usually involve cargo falling, shifting, or overturning. The principle that no worker should stand beneath a suspended load is universally recognized, yet routinely ignored under the pressure to move goods faster. Vehicle collisions involve massive, often blind-spotted equipment such as straddle carriers, forklifts, and yard trucks moving perilously close to unprotected workers. Falls from gangways, cranes, or stacked containers are frequent and deadly, made worse by inadequate rescue provisions. Confined space incidents occur when workers enter oxygen-depleted or toxic areas without proper equipment, often to just quickly perform a task. More than 3/4 of all fatalities occur during active cargo operations, where the profit imperative is at its most intense. Deaths are nearly evenly divided between shipboard and shore-based sites. Bulk carriers, general cargo ships, and roll-on roll-off vessels are deadliest at sea. On land, quaysides, terminals, and warehouses claim the most lives. Containerized cargo central to global trade is the single most lethal cargo type for dockworkers.